Snow danced across the Montana highlands like a ghostly veil. In January 1877, the region was gripped by a biting frost. The cold gnawed at flesh and bone, and breath hung in the air like mist from a dying ember. Two groups, one under Colonel Nelson A. Miles and the other led by the resolute Lakota chief Crazy Horse, faced each other in this frozen silence. What followed would be known as the Battle of Wolf Mountain, one of the last major encounters of the Great Sioux War. Fought not only with guns and knives, but also against the relentless fury of nature, the battle was a testament to endurance. Miles, a tenacious officer with a jaw carved like stone and an unshakable will, had earned a formidable reputation through his relentless campaigns across the northern plains. He understood that winter was both an ally and an obstacle. In the depth of the season, soldiers could navigate frozen landscapes, rivers could be crossed without boats, and native encampments, weary and undersupplied, could be caught off guard. It was a brutal strategy, but Miles was a student of warfare, and the frontier had taught him that mercy was rarely reciprocal. Crazy Horse, by contrast, had never sought war for glory. Born in the land of the buffalo and shaped by the rhythm of the plains, he was a quiet, enigmatic figure who fought out of duty. Treaties had been broken, buffalo herds slaughtered, and the Lakota way of life was under threat. Less than a year earlier, Crazy Horse had dealt a crushing defeat to General George A. Custer and his 7th Cavalry at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Yet the tide was turning. The U.S. Army responded with overwhelming force, and the great tribes of the northern plains were beginning to scatter. By early January 1877, Crazy Horse's band had taken refuge along the Tongue River near the snow-covered peaks of Wolf Mountain, exhausted, hungry, and chilled from the unending pursuit. He wasn't seeking conflict, but Miles was closing in swiftly, and the ground was hard, icy, and unforgiving. On January 8, 1877, Miles reached the bluffs above the Tongue River with a force of approximately 436 men, including infantry, cavalry, and Indian scouts. They were poorly equipped for the weather, dressed in buffalo hides and thick wool, their breath steaming through frostbitten beards. Visibility was limited due to heavy snowfall that sliced sideways in the wind. But Miles had no intention of turning back. The Lakota needed to be subdued, and winter would aid his mission. Below, Crazy Horse's camp buzzed with urgency. It was not a military stronghold. Many families were present, including women, elders, and children. There were no fortifications, only the resolve to survive another day. But the Lakota had endured hardships before. Crazy Horse and his warriors organized quickly, gathering what firearms they had and riding out to meet the soldiers on the high ground. What unfolded was not a dramatic cavalry charge or a theatrical last stand, but a grim, rugged skirmish in the snow, fought across steep ridges, icy ravines, and wind-swept fields. The first shots rang out as Lakota warriors climbed the bluffs to engage the troops. Miles had positioned his men on elevated ground, a calculated move that provided visibility and range, but the weather thwarted them at every step. Rifles seized, boots cracked in the cold, fingers stiffened on triggers, yet both sides pressed forward. Crazy Horse led a series of bold flanking attacks, aiming to disrupt the soldiers' lines. His riders glided through the snow like phantoms, using the terrain to their advantage. Some closed in for hand-to-hand fighting, but Miles held firm. Artillery roared through the storm, tearing gashes in the earth and stirring clouds of white powder. The wind howled so fiercely that scouts later reported struggling to hear shouted orders. Yet the battle continued, a clash of two worlds on a field of frozen stillness. The fight, though short, was intense. For roughly 4 hours, the snow soaked up blood. Horses collapsed from exhaustion, and men fell, some never to rise again. Then, as suddenly as it began, the fighting tapered off. Recognizing the odds and the danger to his people, Crazy Horse began to withdraw his forces. He hadn't been defeated. Far from it. He had challenged Miles, held his ground, and once again shown why his name struck fear into seasoned commanders. But he also saw the reality in the snow. The U.S. Army would not yield. With the families of his people vulnerable to the harsh winter, he chose survival over slaughter. Miles, battered but steadfast, claimed the field. His men dug in that night beneath a sky streaked with clouds, firelight flickering across frostbitten faces. It was a hollow victory. The Lakota had not been crushed, but they were slipping into the snowdrifts, deeper into the hills, farther from safety. The Battle of Wolf Mountain did not drastically alter the course of the conflict, but it marked a shift in spirit. It showed that even Crazy Horse, the brilliant strategist and fearless warrior, was running out of options. Within months, the war bands that had once roamed proudly across the plains began to surrender. The buffalo were gone, ammunition was scarce, and the hope of freedom was fading. On May 6, 1877, Crazy Horse surrendered at the Red Cloud Agency in Nebraska, not under General George Crook, who was absent, but under Lieutenant William P. Clark of the 2nd Cavalry. Clark had been managing affairs with the Sioux at both the Red Cloud and Spotted Tail agencies, demonstrating remarkable skill and diplomacy. Major George A. Randall and Lieutenant John G. Burke were also present, representing the department's commanding officer. The surrender was not a grand ceremony but carried the weight of history. Crazy Horse rode in with a select escort of about 300 warriors, adorned in vivid war paint, feathers, and finely crafted weapons, evoking the grandeur of medieval knights. Another 200 mounted warriors watched from nearby ridges, silent and vigilant. Walking beside Crazy Horse were trusted leaders, including Little Wolf and He-Dog, his inner circle. Few others were permitted near him, and his commanding presence set him apart. Crazy Horse was approximately 36 years old, tall, well-built, and proud. He resembled other strong, intelligent Sioux warriors, but his quiet dignity and intense demeanor distinguished him. His eyes, sharp and restless, gave him an aura that could unsettle even seasoned frontiersmen. A scar on his left cheek, from a bullet wound sustained in a personal dispute years earlier, pulled one side of his mouth into a taut line, lending his face a stern expression. Beneath that scar lay a depth that spoke of a man who had led his people through years of resistance and now faced the end of an era. Crazy Horse approached Lieutenant Clark alone. After covering a short distance, he sat quietly on the ground and waited. Clark, honoring the gesture, did the same. Moments later, Crazy Horse stood, closed the remaining distance, and extended his hand. They shook, but no words came from the warrior's lips. A council followed, with Red Cloud speaking on Crazy Horse's behalf. The renowned war leader remained silent, true to his reserved nature. Red Cloud emphasized that Crazy Horse and his warriors had not been vanquished in battle nor surrendered out of fear. This was a decision made for the sake of his people, and just as they had followed him in war, they followed him into peace, trusting his judgment. Between 1,000 and 1,500 Sioux men, women, and children surrendered that day, including about 500 seasoned warriors. They brought 2,200 ponies, all in robust condition, and turned in 147 firearms, including high-quality sporting rifles and .45 caliber Springfield carbines, the same used by the U.S. Army. However, it was widely suspected that many weapons were hidden in remote locations known only to the Sioux, ready for future need. Crazy Horse had not visited a government agency in over a decade, and his return was met with unease. Colonel Ronald S. McKenzie, still bitter over Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn, viewed Crazy Horse's peaceful reception with disdain. In his eyes, Crazy Horse deserved confinement at Camp Robinson's guardhouse, perhaps even menial labor to humble him. Nearby Indian villages, including those of the Arapaho and Cheyenne, kept their distance, wary of Crazy Horse's unpredictable nature. The Cheyenne, in particular, were exhausted from the fighting, arriving at the agency tattered and nearly starving. They spoke candidly. Their will to fight had been extinguished. Few accounts better capture the Sioux perspective than the events surrounding Crazy Horse's surrender. When word reached the authorities that he was approaching the agency, Lieutenant J. Wesley Rosenquist of the 4th Cavalry was sent with an escort and a supply train loaded with government rations to meet him. The Sioux welcomed the provisions like long-lost kin, many not having tasted sugar, tea, or hardtack in years. Their hunger spoke louder than orders, and they camped on the spot, refusing to move. That night and the next day, they ate relentlessly until every morsel was gone. Even then, they lingered for 2 more days, too sated to travel, despite Rosenquist's growing impatience. Finally, they resumed the journey. But as they neared the agency, a commotion erupted. Young warriors scouting ahead spotted a herd of antelope and opened fire. The gunshots triggered panic through the camp, with women, children, dogs, and ponies stampeding into the bluffs, fearing an ambush. It took time to restore order and regroup. Among the crowd were many striking women, their faces etched with hardship and pride, reflecting the land they called home.